Wake him up, take his badge, and get him out. Victoria Langley's voice cut through the glass-walled security floor at 6:43 on a gray Monday morning, sharp enough to make every engineer in the room stop typing. At the center station, beneath 3 flickering monitors and a ceiling light that hummed like an old refrigerator, Nathan Cole lay with his cheek against the edge of a keyboard, one hand still resting near the mouse, his sleeves wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes closed from a kind of exhaustion no one in that room had bothered to understand. A paper hospital bracelet sat beside his elbow, folded carefully around a small USB drive shaped like a white rabbit. An empty can of gas station coffee had rolled near his shoe. On the largest screen above him, a red warning box pulsed with 2 words that should have changed everything. Containment successful. But Victoria did not see those words first. She saw the sleeping man. She saw the low-level night shift analyst who had already missed 2 staff meetings that month. The quiet single father who wore the same navy jacket every week. The employee Derek Shaw had described as reliable enough for basic monitoring. Not much else. Derek stood 2 steps behind her now, clean-shaven, polished, perfectly awake, holding a tablet against his chest like a shield. I warned him, Derek said, loud enough for the others to hear. We had a critical overnight window, and he couldn't even stay conscious. A few employees looked down at their keyboards. One young analyst swallowed hard. Nobody laughed. Not yet. But the room carried that cruel little pressure that comes before people decide whether a man deserves mercy. Victoria walked closer. Her heels clicked against the raised floor panels. Nathan stirred, as if climbing back from the bottom of deep water. His eyes opened slowly, bloodshot and unfocused. For a second, he seemed not to know where he was. Then he saw Victoria, saw Derek, saw the security guard already approaching from the far door, and something quiet settled over his face. Not panic, not anger, just the tired dignity of a man who had no strength left to defend himself from people who had already chosen the easiest story. Ms. Langley, he said, his voice rough. Check the logs. Victoria's jaw tightened. I checked the room. Please, Nathan said, pushing himself upright with one trembling hand. The hospital network was hit. St. Mercy. They came through the pediatric scheduling node, then tried to pivot into patient records. I stopped the main branch, but there's a delayed trigger buried in the enough. The word landed hard. Across the room, several monitors continued to blink with strings of code, timestamps, blocked IP addresses, and emergency scripts still running under Nathan's credentials. The truth was right there, glowing in blue and green and red. But truth is easy to miss when pride walks in first. Derek gave a small sigh, the kind a man gives when pretending to be disappointed. This is exactly what I mean. He always has an explanation. Nathan turned toward him, not with hatred, but with something almost sad. Derek, you know what that script is. Derek's eyes narrowed. What I know is that you were asleep during a live contract review. Victoria lifted her hand, and the room fell still. Beyond the glass, dawn was spreading across downtown Chicago, pale and cold over the tops of buildings, touching the Langley Systems logo in silver light. In less than 3 hours, Victoria was supposed to face the board and finalize the largest medical cybersecurity contract her company had ever touched. 37 children's hospitals, millions of records, a future she had fought 10 years to build. And here, in the room that was supposed to prove discipline, she found a man asleep at his post. Mr. Cole, she said, controlled and cold. Langley Systems cannot carry people who confuse responsibility with excuses. Nathan blinked once. He looked at the hospital bracelet by his hand, then at the tiny rabbit USB beside it, then back at her. My daughter is at St. Mercy. That sentence should have slowed the room. It should have opened a door somewhere inside Victoria's heart. Instead, Derek stepped in quickly. A lot of us have personal problems, Nathan. Nathan looked past him, toward the hallway glass. His face changed. Near the elevator, a little girl in a pink winter coat stood frozen with a backpack hanging from one shoulder. Emily Cole, 8 years old, had been dropped off early by a neighbor because Nathan was supposed to take her to a cardiology appointment after his shift. Her blonde hair was tucked unevenly under a knit hat, and in her hands she held a paper bag with a blueberry muffin inside, the kind she brought her dad when she thought he worked too hard. She saw the guard. She saw the badge in Nathan's hand. She saw every adult in that bright, expensive room, staring at her father like he had done something shameful. Nathan stood slowly. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He removed his badge, placed it on the desk, and picked up the rabbit USB with a gentleness that made one analyst look away. Victoria watched him, waiting for bitterness, excuses, maybe even a final burst of anger. But Nathan only straightened the photograph taped to his monitor, a picture of Emily missing one front tooth, smiling beside a grocery store birthday cake. Then he turned to the guard and nodded. "I can walk." As he passed Victoria, he stopped just long enough to say, softly, "When the second wave starts, don't let Derek isolate the wrong server. It's not where he thinks it is." Derek scoffed. Victoria's eyes hardened. "Escort him out." The glass doors opened. The security floor remained silent except for the soft buzz of machines that Nathan had kept alive for 48 hours. Emily ran to him in the hallway, her muffin bag crushed against her chest. "Daddy," she whispered, looking up at the guard, then back at him. "Did you do something bad?" Nathan lowered himself to one knee, though every movement looked painful. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and smiled, the kind of smile fathers use when their own hearts are breaking, but their children still need shelter. "No, sweetheart," he said. "Then why are they making you leave?" Behind the glass, Victoria heard the question. So did every person in the room. Nathan rested a hand on Emily's shoulder and answered quietly. "Because sometimes people see the moment you fall before they see the hours you stood." For one brief second, Victoria Langley did not move. The words touched something she had buried under years of ambition, discipline, and fear. Then her phone buzzed with a bored reminder. Derek cleared his throat, and the moment passed. Nathan took his daughter's hand and walked toward the elevators, carrying nothing but a cheap jacket, a child's USB drive, and the truth no one had cared to read. Behind him, on the main monitor, the red warning box flickered once, then vanished. In its place, a new alert appeared, silent at first, small enough to ignore, dangerous enough to change everything. The elevator doors closed with a soft metallic breath, sealing Nathan and Emily away from the bright security floor where his name had just been reduced to a problem. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The numbers above the door counted down from 42, one quiet floor at a time, while Emily held his hand with both of hers as if she could keep him from disappearing too. Nathan looked at their reflection in the polished steel wall, a tired man with red eyes and a wrinkled shirt, a little girl in a pink coat trying to be brave before breakfast, and between them a paper bag crushed around a muffin that had survived the morning better than either of them had. "I brought blueberry," she said softly. Nathan turned his head, and the ache in his chest eased just enough for him to smile. "My favorite. You always say that. Because you always bring the right one." She studied his face with the serious focus children use when they know adults are hiding storms behind small smiles. "Are we still going to my appointment?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. Nothing changes that. But something had changed, and she knew it. Children who grow up with one parent learn the weather of a house by the sound of a key in the door, by the way a bill gets folded, by the pause before the word okay. Emily had learned those things too early. She knew when her father was tired. She knew when he was worried. She knew the difference between a normal silence and the kind that sat heavy in his shoulders. When the elevator opened into the marble lobby of Langley Systems, Monday morning had already begun, without mercy. Employees crossed beneath the hanging lights with travel mugs, laptop bags, and clean confidence. A few glanced at Nathan, then away. His security badge was gone, and in buildings like that, a missing badge spoke louder than a confession. Nathan kept his head level. He did not hide his face. He walked beside his daughter with the same quiet dignity he used when rent was late, when the car would not start, when Emily woke up afraid before a doctor visit, and asked if brave people were allowed to cry. Outside, Chicago wind swept between the towers and tugged at Emily's hat. Nathan zipped her coat higher, then guided her toward the curb where his 12-year-old gray Toyota waited with salt stains along the doors and a rear bumper held steady by stubborn hope. Inside the car, the heater coughed twice before giving them warm air. Emily placed the muffin bag on the center console like an offering. "Daddy," she said after a while. "Why did that lady look at you like that?" Nathan pulled into traffic slowly, watching a bus hiss past in the next lane. Sometimes people in charge are scared, and scared people like simple answers. "Were you the simple answer?" He glanced at her, surprised by the question, then back to the road. This morning, I think I was. She frowned, turning the rabbit USB over in her fingers. But you were helping. Nathan's hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel. The little white rabbit had been Emily's idea 2 years earlier, bought from a hospital gift shop after a long appointment. She said important things should live inside something kind. Since then, Nathan had kept emergency tools on it: recovery keys, offline scripts, old diagnostic utilities, small pieces of a life he had never fully explained to anyone at Langley Systems. People there saw him as the night analyst, the man who checked alerts and reset locked accounts, the one who brought peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and left sticky notes on monitors that said things like, "Patched at 2:30 in the morning, please restart after coffee." They did not know that 12 years earlier, in a sealed conference room outside Washington, District of Columbia, Nathan Cole had helped design defensive systems for medical networks after a national ransomware scare nearly shut down emergency services across several states. They did not know senior engineers once argued over his diagrams. They did not know federal consultants had called him the firewall ghost because he could see patterns in traffic that other people missed, not because he was magic, but because he listened to machines with patience most people reserved for music. And they did not know why he had walked away. That part belonged to a hospital room, a wedding ring in a paper envelope, and a little girl too young to understand why her mother's voice no longer filled their apartment on Sunday mornings. Nathan had not left brilliance because he lost it. He left because grief made applause sound hollow, and fatherhood became the only mission that still made sense. He needed a job with health insurance. He needed nights because Emily needed days. He needed invisibility because fame demanded hours he no longer had. Langley Systems gave him a desk near the back of the security floor, a paycheck that stretched thin but steady, and managers who underestimated him enough to leave him alone. For a while, that had been enough. He could pick Emily up from school by 3:15. He could make grilled cheese on Fridays. He could sit beside her bed during bad nights and count her breaths until dawn. Quiet had become a shelter. Ordinary had become grace. Then, 48 hours ago, at 2:17 in the morning, a single line of traffic moved through a forgotten vendor port linked to St. Mercy Children's Hospital network. It was small, too small for a dashboard alarm, too clean for a mistake. Nathan had been eating half of a turkey sandwich when he saw it. He leaned closer, wiped mustard from his thumb, and watched the line split into 3 requests, then 9, then 27. The pattern was patient, almost polite. That was what made it dangerous. He had sent Derek Shaw a priority message within 6 minutes. Possible intrusion attempt through pediatric scheduling interface. Recommend immediate isolation of vendor tunnel. Derek replied 23 minutes later. Monitor only. Do not escalate without confirmation. Nathan stared at the words. On another night, for another client, he might have obeyed. But the hospital name sat in the corner of the screen like a hand around his heart. St. Mercy was where Emily's cardiologist worked. St. Mercy was where her records lived, where her next appointment waited, where nurses knew she liked grape popsicles after blood draws. Nathan pushed his sandwich aside, opened a command window, and whispered to the empty room. Not this one. Now, as he turned into the hospital parking garage with Emily beside him, the rabbit USB warm in her palm, his phone buzzed again and again from inside his jacket. He did not check it. He already knew storms rarely ended just because proud people stopped looking at the sky. By the time Nathan and Emily reached the 3rd floor of St. Mercy Children's Hospital, the morning had softened into the kind of quiet that only hospitals understand. The hallway smelled faintly of hand soap, warm oatmeal from the cafeteria, and the clean plastic scent of medical tubing. Nurses moved in soft shoes past painted murals of clouds and kites. Somewhere behind a half-open door, a cartoon played too loudly for a child who had fallen asleep before the first commercial. Nathan signed Emily in at the cardiology desk with a hand that still felt too heavy to belong to him. The receptionist, Mrs. Alvarez, looked up and smiled with the tired kindness of someone who had seen too many worried parents pretend they were fine. Good morning, Emily. You brought the rabbit again. Emily lifted the white USB drive like a tiny prize. It keeps important things safe. Mrs. Alvarez chuckled. Then you better keep it close. Nathan tried to smile, but his phone buzzed again inside his jacket. Then again. He ignored it until Emily noticed. Is that work? She asked. Not anymore. he said gently. The words tasted strange, like a door closing in his mouth. Emily looked down at her shoes. They were purple sneakers with silver stars, worn at the toes because she dragged her feet when she was nervous. Nathan reached over and tapped one star with his finger. Those still fast. Fast enough, she said. For what? For running away from broccoli. He laughed quietly, and for 3 seconds, he was only a father in a hospital hallway, making his daughter smile before a doctor listened to her heart. But across town, 42 floors above downtown Chicago, Victoria Langley was not smiling. She stood in the boardroom of Langley Systems with her tablet in one hand and Nathan's absence sitting in the room like a chair no one wanted to acknowledge. The board had arrived early. Men and women in dark suits sat beneath a wall of glass overlooking the city, coffee cups lined in front of them, their expressions polished into patience. On the far screen, the St. Mercy Children's Hospital Network contract waited in a blue presentation folder. 37 hospitals, 14 states, a 5-year security partnership that would make Langley Systems the name every medical network trusted. Victoria had built her company for this moment. She had slept in airports for it, missed holidays for it, learned to turn doubt into fuel for it. Her father, who had founded a regional software firm and lost it after trusting the wrong partner, had raised her on one sentence. Mercy is good for churches, but contracts require control. Victoria believed him for most of her life. Control had given her everything. Control made investors listen. Control turned a shy girl from Evanston into the youngest woman in her industry to take a medical cybersecurity company public. Control kept her voice steady when rooms expected her to soften. But control also taught her to distrust anything that looked like weakness. A missed deadline, a shaking hand, a tired employee asleep at a keyboard. Derek Shaw stood beside the screen now, clicking through slides with smooth confidence. As you can see, our overnight monitoring team detected unusual traffic, contained it, and preserved system integrity. Victoria watched him speak. He was composed, almost too composed. His tie was perfect. His hair was perfect. His summary was clean in the way summaries become clean when someone has washed away inconvenient details. One board member, a silver-haired man named Howard Klein, leaned forward. Was this a confirmed intrusion attempt or routine noise? Derek smiled. Routine noise with aggressive characteristics. Nothing our team could not handle. Victoria's eyes moved to the phrase on the slide, contained by security response team. Not by Nathan Cole. Not by night shift credentials. Not by the man she had watched walk out with his daughter. Just team. Safe. Vague. Useful. And the employee removed this morning? Howard asked. The room shifted slightly. Derek did not look at Victoria before answering. A personnel issue. The individual failed to maintain alert readiness during a sensitive window. Victoria felt the words settle over the table. Failed to maintain alert readiness. It sounded professional. It sounded final. It sounded like the truth if no one cared enough to ask what had happened before the failure. She should have moved on. That was what Victoria did. She cut losses. She made decisions. She kept the ship clean. But a sentence from the hallway kept returning, quiet and stubborn. Sometimes people see the moment you fall before they see the hours you stood. Victoria looked through the glass wall toward the security floor below. Analysts moved between workstations. Screens blinked. Everything appeared normal, but normal had begun to feel staged. Pull up the raw overnight logs, she said. Derek paused with his finger above the clicker. The board does not need raw logs. I have summarized the relevant data. Pull them up. Her tone was not loud, but every person at the table heard the change. Derek gave a small laugh. Victoria, with respect, raw logs will only slow the review. Then we will be slow. The room went still. Derek's smile thinned. He connected the live log archive to the boardroom display. Lines of text filled the screen in dense columns. Timestamps, source addresses, blocked requests, emergency rules, failed authentication bursts, and thousands of entries marked under one user profile. N. Cole. At first, the board members only stared. To them, it was code, numbers, electronic weather. But Victoria could read enough to feel the floor shift beneath her. Nathan had not been idle. He had not even been merely active. He had been everywhere. At 2:23 in the morning, he isolated a vendor. Tunnel. At 3:11, he created a decoy environment. At 4:38, he blocked credential harvesting. At 5:04, he rerouted pediatric scheduling traffic to a protected backup. At 6:12, minutes before she walked in, he executed a final containment script under emergency authorization. Victoria's mouth went dry. "Derek," she said slowly. "Why is his name on every critical action?" Derek adjusted his cuffs. Automated routing sometimes attaches the monitoring analyst's credentials to team procedures. An engineer near the back of the boardroom, a young woman named Priya Nair, looked up too quickly. Derek turned toward her, a warning in his eyes. Victoria saw it. "Priya," she said. "Speak." Priya hesitated, then swallowed. "That is not automated routing." The air tightened. "Those are manual interventions." Derek's face hardened. "She is mistaken." Priya's voice shook, but she kept going. "No, I am not. And there is something else." She reached for the keyboard, pulled up a hidden alert queue, and the main screen changed. A new warning flashed at the top, small but spreading red across the boardroom glow. Delayed trigger detected. Secondary intrusion attempt active. St. Mercy Children's Hospital Network. For the first time that morning, Derek Shaw had nothing polished to say. Victoria Langley did not raise her voice when the warning appeared, and that made the room more afraid. Loud leaders could be survived. Quiet ones meant the ground was moving. She stepped closer to the screen, the red glow reflecting in the glass wall behind her, turning the boardroom windows into mirrors of pale faces and frozen coffee cups. "Explain it," she said. Derek Shaw looked at the alert, then at the board, then back at Victoria, as if the right answer might appear in the space between his pride and the truth. "It is probably residual noise from the earlier event," he said. "A false echo. We see that sometimes when containment systems re-index." Priya Nair shook her head before she could stop herself. "No, we do not. Not like this." Derek snapped his eyes toward her. "Priya." Victoria turned. "Let her finish." Priya rose slowly from her chair near the wall, one hand still on the keyboard, the other curled at her side. She was young enough that several board members had never learned her name, but she had the calm terror of someone watching a bridge crack while everyone else admired the view. "The second trigger is not residual," she said. "It is scheduled. Someone planted it deep enough that the first containment would make us think we were safe. It waited for the defender to leave the session." Howard Klein leaned forward. "The defender being Mr. Cole?" The question landed softly, but it changed the air. Priya nodded. "Yes." Derek exhaled sharply. "This is speculation." Nathan Cole had limited permissions. He was not authorized to design containment architecture. Priya clicked once, and another screen opened. Lines of emergency rules cascaded down the wall display, each one signed with Nathan's credentials, each one placed with surgical precision across the St. Mercy network. "He did not design architecture," she said. "He built a temporary shelter while the building was catching fire." Nobody moved. The phrase hung there, simple and devastating. Victoria stared at the logs. At 2:17 in the morning, the first signal entered through a forgotten vendor port. At 2:23, Nathan marked it. At 2:29, he requested escalation. At 2:52, after receiving no approval, he began local containment. By 4 o'clock, he had created a decoy server. By 6 o'clock, he had written a rule set that isolated pediatric scheduling without disconnecting live hospital operations. By noon the next day, he had separated patient records from the ransom pathway. By midnight, he was still there. By dawn, he was still there. 47 hours and 56 minutes under one user profile. One man sitting under fluorescent lights while everyone above him slept inside the comfort of assumptions. Victoria felt something cold move through her. She thought of Nathan's face when he said, "Check the logs." Not dramatic. Not pleading for admiration. Just asking for the one thing proud people often deny: the quiet. A fair reading of the truth. Her phone rang. The caller identification showed St. Mercy Executive Operations. The boardroom became so still that the vibration sounded loud against the table. "Victoria," answered and placed it on speaker. "This is Victoria Langley." A woman's voice came through, controlled but strained. "Ms. Langley, this is Dr. Helen Morris, Chief Operations Officer at St. Mercy Children's Hospital Network. We are seeing instability across scheduling, pharmacy verification, and backup access. Your team assured us we were contained." Victoria looked at Derek. Derek looked away. "We are reviewing it now," Victoria said. "Doctor, are patients in immediate danger?" "Our clinical teams are using manual procedures." No one is unattended. But if the scheduling system fully locks, we lose visibility across transfers and procedures within the hour. We need your lead engineer on this right now. Victoria swallowed. We have our team here. No, Dr. Morris said, and her voice sharpened. I need the man who called us at 3:11 this morning and walked my night supervisor through a safe backup route. Nathan Cole. He said if the second wave appeared, we were not to let anyone isolate the Western Mirror server. Is he with you? The silence after that question did more damage than any accusation could have. Victoria looked through the glass toward the elevator bank where Nathan had disappeared with Emily. For the first time all morning, she saw the scene again without her own pride standing in front of it. The hospital bracelet, the rabbit drive, the red containment message, the man too tired to stand straight, the daughter asking if he had done something bad. Ms. Langley, Dr. Morris said. Victoria closed her eyes for half a second. He is not currently in the building. Howard Klein's face hardened. Priya looked down. Derek's mouth opened, but nothing useful came out. Dr. Morris spoke slowly. Then I strongly suggest you find him. The call ended. In the reflection of the boardroom glass, Victoria saw herself standing tall in a tailored suit, surrounded by power, backed by money, protected by title. And yet in that moment, all of it felt strangely small. Where is Nathan Cole now? She asked. Priya checked the personnel system, then hesitated. His emergency dependent file lists St. Mercy for Emily Cole's cardiology care. Appointment at 8:30. This morning. Victoria looked at the time. 8:14. Across the room, Derek finally found his voice. Victoria, sending leadership after a terminated employee creates liability. We should handle this internally. She turned toward him, and this time there was no warmth left to remove. You told me he was useless. Derek's face tightened. I told you what I observed. No, she said. You told me what benefited you. The boardroom held its breath. Derek's polished confidence cracked at the edges. Victoria reached for her coat from the back of the chair. Priya, you are coming with me. Bring a secure laptop. Howard, keep the board here. No one touches the Western Mirror server. No one speaks to the press. No one buries another log. She moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Derek. And you do not go near that system until I understand exactly why Nathan Cole had to fight alone for 2 days in my company. On the screen behind her, the red alert pulsed again, patient and unforgiving. Somewhere across the city, a man she had humiliated was sitting beside his daughter in a hospital built for fragile hearts. And Victoria Langley, who had spent her life believing control was the highest form of strength, was about to learn that sometimes grace begins with walking back through the door you slammed on someone else. The hospital parking garage smelled of rainwater, concrete dust, and cold exhaust as Victoria Langley stepped out of the black company SUV with Priya Nair close behind her, carrying a secure laptop against her chest. For once, Victoria did not walk like a woman entering a room she owned. She walked like someone approaching a truth she had delayed too long. The elevator ride up to cardiology felt impossibly slow. Priya kept refreshing the remote dashboard, her face lit by the anxious blue of the screen. The second wave is expanding, she said quietly. It is testing backup access points, but it has not locked them yet. Victoria looked at the floor numbers. 2, 3, 4. How long? Priya swallowed. If Nathan was right about the Western Mirror server, maybe 40 minutes before the wrong move causes a wider failure. Less if someone at headquarters panics. Victoria closed her eyes for one breath, then opened them. Then no one panics. The doors opened to the 3rd floor, where the world felt cruelly calm. A nurse pushed a cart of folded blankets. A little boy in dinosaur pajamas rolled a toy truck along the baseboard. A television in the waiting area played a morning show with the sound turned low. And there, near a window overlooking Lake Michigan, sat Nathan Cole with Emily beside him, both of them holding paper cups of water from the dispenser. Emily had a sticker on the back of her hand from check-in. Nathan had his jacket folded over his knees, his shoulders rounded from 2 days of exhaustion and 1 morning of humiliation. He looked up before Victoria reached him. Not surprised, not pleased, just quiet, as if some part of him had known the storm would eventually find its way to this hallway. Emily saw Victoria and moved closer to her father. Nathan noticed and rested a gentle hand over hers. It is all right, he said. She is not here to take anything else. The words were not bitter, and that made them hurt more. Victoria stopped a few feet away. For the first time in years, she did not know which version of herself to bring forward. The chief executive officer, the negotiator, the woman trained to turn apology into strategy. None of them belonged here. This hallway had no use for polished language. "Mr. Cole," she said softly. "Nathan," he corrected, not sharply, only tired. "Nathan," she said, and the name felt heavier than his job title ever had. The second wave started. He looked at Priya's laptop, then at Victoria. Did Derek isolate the Western Mirror? Not yet. Nathan let out a slow breath. Good. Priya stepped forward. The trigger is branching through pharmacy verification and scheduling backups. I found your containment tree, but I do not understand why you left the Western Mirror untouched. Nathan's eyes shifted toward Emily. She was listening, trying to be brave, trying to understand words too large for a child's mourning. He lowered his voice. Because it is bait. If they isolate it, the system will assume a regional outage and reroute through the infected vendor tunnel. Then every hospital in the network starts trusting the wrong path. Priya's face lost color. Victoria felt the sentence move through her like cold water. Can you stop it? Nathan looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the kind of fatigue that turns the body into a distant thing. Yes. Victoria's breath caught. Will you? The question sat between them. A security guard laughed softly at the nurse's station about something unrelated. A child coughed down the hall. Somewhere behind a door, a monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, reminding everyone that time was not just money here. Time was breath, medicine, appointments, names on charts, parents waiting for answers. Nathan did not answer quickly. He looked at Emily, then at the small rabbit USB in her lap. Sweetheart, he said, do you remember what we said important things need? Emily nodded. A safe place. That is right. Is the hospital not safe? He brushed his thumb over her knuckles. It is full of safe people. But sometimes safe people need help protecting the doors. Emily looked at Victoria. Children can forgive faster than adults, but they can also see straighter. Are you going to be mean to my dad again? The question struck the hallway into silence. Priya looked away. Victoria knelt, slowly, so her eyes were level with Emily's. The marble floor was cold beneath her knee, and for once she did not care who saw her lowered. No, Victoria said. I was wrong to be mean to him the first time. Emily studied her face. He was really tired. I know that now. He gets tired because he takes care of everything. Victoria glanced at Nathan, and the truth of that sentence needed no log file. She stood, but her voice stayed low. Nathan, I cannot undo what I did in that room. But the hospital needs you. My company needs you. And I am asking, not ordering. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. This was the strange weight of grace. It always gave the undeserving a chance to become better, but it never pretended the wound had not happened. Finally, he reached for the rabbit USB and held it toward Priya. There is an offline recovery key on this drive. Do not plug it into any network machine. Air-gapped only. Priya nodded quickly. Understood. Nathan tried to stand, but the hallway tilted just enough that he had to grip the chair. Victoria stepped forward, then stopped herself, letting him choose whether to accept help. Emily rose and took his arm with both hands. Daddy, I am okay, he said, though everyone could hear the effort behind it. A nurse approached, concerned, but Nathan gave a small, apologetic smile. I just need a chair, a clean laptop, and 10 minutes where nobody interrupts me. Victoria looked at Priya. Get him whatever he asks for. Within 3 minutes, a small consultation room became the quietest command center in Chicago. Priya set the secure laptop on a desk. Victoria stood by the door, keeping calls away. Emily sat in the corner with her muffin, watching her father like he was both ordinary and extraordinary, which is how children often see the people who love them best. Nathan placed the rabbit USB beside the keyboard, flexed his stiff fingers once, and began to type. The screen filled with commands, routes, keys, and temporary walls built in language most people would never understand. His eyes sharpened. His breathing steadied. The tired man from the hallway was still there, but beneath him, something old and brilliant woke up without pride, without performance, without applause. At Langley Systems, the boardroom watched the dashboard change. Red lines slowed, then paused. Then one by one, they began turning amber. Priya whispered into the call, he is inside the decoy layer. Victoria stared through the consultation room window at Nathan's bowed head, at Emily's small hand resting near his sleeve, at the quiet dignity she had almost thrown away. And for the first time since building her empire, she understood that the strongest person in the crisis was not the one standing above everyone with authority. It was the one who had every reason to walk away, and still chose to protect the doors. Nathan did not look like a man saving a company. He looked like a father trying not to fall asleep in a hospital consultation room, shoulders bent under a cheap navy jacket, collar wrinkled, eyes red, from too many hours of fluorescent light and worry. But the laptop in front of him told a different story. His fingers moved with calm precision, never rushed, never dramatic, each command placed like a brick in a wall only he could see. Priya stood beside him with her notebook open, barely writing now because she was too busy watching. Victoria remained near the door, one hand over her phone, blocking calls from board members, attorneys, and Derek Shaw, who had suddenly developed an urgent interest in helping. She sent every call to voicemail. For once, the most important voice in the room was not the loudest one. "The Western Mirror is still clean," Priya said quietly. "But the trigger is trying to force a trust handshake through the vendor tunnel." Nathan nodded without looking away from the screen. "It wants us to panic. If we shut the mirror down, we give it the detour. Then what do? We let it think we are afraid." Priya blinked. Victoria looked up. Nathan typed another line, then another. "Fear has patterns," he said. "So does arrogance. Whoever built this assumed the response team would protect the obvious door and forget the quiet one." He paused, eyes narrowing at the screen. "That is how people like Derek lose systems." No one answered. The name settled heavily, but Nathan did not enjoy saying it. There was no revenge in his voice, only diagnosis. On the hospital network dashboard, red branches stretched toward scheduling, pharmacy verification, and transfer coordination. Nathan opened a sealed environment, then a second, then a third. He did not attack the intrusion directly. He guided it, gave it a hallway that looked real, a set of credentials that looked forgotten, a copy of the Western Mirror that looked vulnerable. Priya leaned closer. "You are building another decoy." "Not another," Nathan said. "The one I started at 4 a.m. I did not have time to finish it before." He stopped. Before he had collapsed. Before Victoria had walked in. Before the badge had been taken from his desk, while his daughter watched from the hallway. Victoria lowered her eyes. "Before I interrupted you," she said. Nathan did not look back. "Before." The room stopped listening. The words were soft, but they carried more weight than anger. Emily sat in the corner, small legs swinging above the floor, the blueberry muffin untouched in her lap. She watched the adults with the solemn patience of a child who had spent too many mornings in waiting rooms. A nurse had offered to take her to the play area, but Emily refused. "I am staying where Daddy can see me," she had said, and no one argued. Now she hugged her backpack and whispered, "Is the bad computer going away?" Nathan's face softened immediately. "It is getting lost." "On purpose?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She nodded, satisfied in the simple justice of it. It should not mess with hospitals. Priya smiled despite the tension. Victoria almost did, too, but the ache in her chest would not let her. Across town, the boardroom at Langley Systems watched the same dashboard on a wall of glass and light. Howard Klein stood behind the conference table, arms crossed, his silver hair catching the glow of the red alerts. The other board members had stopped drinking coffee. Nobody spoke over the open line anymore. Derek stood near the far end of the room, trying to look useful without touching anything. Every few minutes, he opened his mouth, then closed it again when another one of Nathan's commands turned a red branch amber. At 8:39, the pharmacy verification path stabilized. At 8:42, pediatric scheduling stopped dropping requests. At 8:46, the transfer coordination backup reconnected without using the infected tunnel. Priya whispered the updates as they came. "He is separating live operations from the false route." Victoria watched Nathan's hands. They trembled between commands now. Twice he flexed his fingers. Once he closed his eyes for 2 seconds too long, then forced them open. "Nathan," she said gently, "do you need a break?" He gave a faint smile. "That is a dangerous question in a hospital." "I mean it." "So do I." He typed again. "Breaks are for after the door locks." Emily slid off her chair and walked to him. Without a word, she placed the muffin beside the laptop, carefully away from the cables. Nathan glanced at it, and something in his expression broke. Open for half a second. Gratitude, sorrow, love, all of it too quiet for anyone careless to notice. Thank you, sweetheart. You have to eat after, she said. Doctor says hearts need fuel. Doctor is right. Victoria turned away, pretending to check her phone. She had led billion-dollar negotiations without blinking, but the sight of a child reminding her father to eat nearly undid her. In that moment, she understood that Nathan had not fought for a contract. He had not fought for Langley Systems, not really. He had fought because behind every medical record was a child with a backpack, a parent with tired eyes, a family praying ordinary systems would hold long enough for healing to continue. At 8:51, Nathan stopped typing. The room seemed to stop with him. On the laptop, the false environment glowed green. The intrusion followed the bait pathway, accepted the fake credentials, and sealed itself inside a harmless loop cut off from the hospital network. Priya covered her mouth with one hand. It took it. Nathan waited. 1 second. 2. 3. Then he executed the final command from the Rabbit USB. The dashboard changed all at once. Red vanished from the main hospital paths. Amber lines turned blue. Blue turned green. In the boardroom speaker, someone exhaled like they had been holding their breath for 10 minutes. Howard Klein's voice came through, low and stunned. Is it contained? Priya looked at Nathan. Nathan checked one last log, then leaned back slowly. Yes. No applause came at first. Not in the consultation room. Not in the boardroom. The silence was too large for applause, too honest for noise. Emily walked to her father and wrapped both arms around his side. Nathan rested his hand on her shoulder, eyes closing for one careful breath. Victoria stood at the door, unable to move, because the strongest proof of his brilliance was not the saved dashboard or the grateful board or the green lights spreading across the screen. It was the fact that after being judged, shamed, and dismissed, Nathan Cole had still chosen to protect the people who needed him. And in that quiet room at St. Mercy, power finally lowered its head before dignity. The green lights on Priya's laptop did not bring celebration right away. They brought stillness. For nearly 10 seconds, nobody in the consultation room spoke, and from the open call to Langley Systems, the boardroom remained just as quiet. Nathan kept one hand on Emily's shoulder and the other near the keyboard, as if part of him still expected the system to twitch, to lie, to pretend it had surrendered when it had only stepped backward. He checked the logs again, then the backup route, then the hospital access queue. Only after the final confirmation appeared did he breathe in deeply and let his hand fall from the mouse. It is clean, he said. Priya closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down before she could hide it. You saved them. Nathan shook his head gently. The hospital staff saved them. They kept working when the screens got unreliable. I just kept the doors from locking. That was Nathan Cole. Even when truth finally placed him in the center of the room, he tried to move the light toward somebody else. Victoria heard that and felt the shame of it more deeply than before. She had mistaken humility for weakness, exhaustion for neglect, silence for guilt. Now she stood beside a man who had every reason to make the room kneel, and instead he was giving credit to nurses. From the speaker on Priya's laptop, Howard Klein's voice came through carefully. Mr. Cole, this is Howard Klein from the Langley Systems Board. On behalf of all of us, thank you. Nathan looked at the laptop as if the voice belonged to another world, the world of polished tables and protected people. You are welcome. We would like you to return to headquarters immediately, Howard continued. There are matters to discuss regarding the contract, your role, and the event report. Nathan's expression did not change, but Emily's hand tightened around his jacket. Victoria saw it. So did Priya. Before Nathan could answer, Victoria stepped toward the laptop. No, she said. The word was calm. Howard paused. No. Nathan is not leaving the hospital right now. His daughter has an appointment. The board can wait. Another silence followed, but this one was different. It was the sound of power learning to rearrange itself around something more human than urgency. Nathan turned toward her, surprised. Victoria did not look away. I mean it, she said softly. Your daughter comes first. Emily looked up at her father, then at Victoria, unsure what to do with kindness from someone who had frightened her less than 2 hours earlier. Nathan gave a small nod, but he did not smile yet. Trust is not a switch. It is a door that opens slowly and only from the inside. A nurse knocked lightly, then opened the consultation room door. "Emily Cole," she said, "Dr. Reynolds is ready for you." Emily picked up her backpack, then hesitated. "Can Daddy come?" Nathan stood too quickly, and the room tilted under him. He gripped the edge of the desk. Victoria moved half a step, stopped again, and waited. Nathan steadied himself with dignity intact, but the cost of the last 2 days was written across his face. "I am coming," he said. Emily slipped her hand into his. Before they left, Nathan turned to Priya. "Do not let anyone purge the temporary logs." Priya nodded. "I already backed them up to a secure archive." "Good. And if Derek asks for access, he will not get it," Victoria said. Nathan met her eyes for a long second. "That matters." Then he walked with Emily down the hall toward cardiology, slower than usual, but upright. Victoria watched them go. She noticed the way he shortened his stride to match Emily's. She noticed how every nurse seemed to know them. She noticed how ordinary goodness leaves fingerprints everywhere without asking to be photographed. When the door to the exam area closed behind them, Victoria turned back to Priya. "Show me everything Derek touched." Priya's face hardened with quiet resolve. "There is more." She opened a folder labeled Executive Summaries and pulled up the report Derek had sent before the board meeting. Nathan's name was missing. His escalation request had been marked as low priority after the fact. His emergency containment tree had been copied into a team document under Derek's authorship. The timestamps did not lie. Truth rarely needs a raised voice when the records are clean. Victoria read each line, and her expression became still, in a way Priya had never seen before. "He erased him," Victoria said. "He tried to," Priya replied. "But Nathan built the final key outside the company network. That is why Derek could not finish the containment without him." Victoria looked toward the cardiology door. "The rabbit USB." "Yes." His daughter was carrying the proof. Priya nodded. "And the way he wrote the recovery chain. I have never seen anything like it. It is old school, but elegant. Human readable. Layered. It is almost like he built it for someone to understand under pressure. Because he knew no one would listen until it was nearly too late," Victoria said. The sentence came out quietly, and it hurt because it was true. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Derek. She answered, but did not speak first. "Victoria," Derek said quickly, his voice strained beneath a layer of false calm. "I heard Cole stabilized the system. Great news. I can take over from here and clean up the report before the board sees anything confusing." Victoria looked at Priya, then at the hospital hallway where Emily had disappeared. "Derek, the board has already seen enough. I think there is a misunderstanding." "There is." Her voice lowered. "I misunderstood who was protecting this company." Derek breathed in sharply. "Victoria, be careful. You are letting emotion cloud a personnel matter." "No," she said. "For the first time today, emotion is helping me see the person inside the matter." She ended the call. At Langley Systems, Derek stood in the boardroom with the phone still near his ear, while the directors looked at him with new eyes. No one accused him yet. No one shouted. That would come later, with auditors, records, and consequences. But the first judgment had already arrived, and it was the one proud people fear most. The room had stopped believing him. Back at St. Mercy, Victoria sat in the hallway chair Nathan had occupied earlier. The vinyl was warm from where he had waited with his daughter, unemployed, exhausted, and still ready to serve. She picked up the untouched blueberry muffin from the consultation desk, now wrapped carefully in its paper bag, and held it in both hands like evidence of a world she had almost missed. A few minutes later, Emily's laughter floated faintly from behind the cardiology door, small and bright. Victoria closed her eyes. She had come to the hospital to recover a system. Instead, she had found the measure of a man. And soon, the company that had watched him walk out in shame would have to stand before him in truth. By 10:07 that morning, the sky over Chicago had brightened, but the light inside Langley Systems felt colder than before. The boardroom was no longer arranged for a victory presentation. The contract slides were gone. The coffee had gone untouched. On the wall display, Priya's archived logs filled the screen in clean, unforgiving order, and every timestamp told the same story from a different angle. Nathan Cole had seen the threat first. Nathan Cole had escalated it. Nathan Cole had contained it. Nathan Cole had been erased from the summary before Victoria ever walked into the security floor. Howard Klein stood at the head of the table, reading silently with his glasses low on his nose. Two legal advisors sat near the door, speaking in soft phrases that made no promises. Derek Shaw occupied the chair farthest from the screen, his posture still neat, his expression still controlled, but the confidence had drained from him in small, visible ways. His tie was loosened by half an inch. His fingers tapped once, then stopped when he noticed everyone could hear it. Victoria entered with Priya beside her, and the room rose out of habit. She did not tell them to sit. She walked to the display, placed Nathan's recovered event timeline on the main screen, and let the silence do the first work. "This is the original escalation message," she said, sent by Nathan Cole at 2:23 in the morning. The message appeared in plain text, precise and calm. Possible intrusion attempt through pediatric scheduling interface. Recommend immediate isolation of vendor tunnel. Howard looked toward Derek. "Your response." Priya clicked, and Derek's reply appeared beneath it. "Monitor only. Do not escalate without confirmation." Derek cleared his throat. At that stage, the data was incomplete. Victoria nodded once. Then at 2:52, Nathan began local containment after no escalation was approved. At 3:11, he contacted St. Mercy's night supervisor and guided manual backup procedures. At 4:38, he created a decoy environment. At 6:12, he executed emergency containment. At 6:43, I walked in and fired him. No one softened the statement. No one could. It stood in the room with its plain shoes and terrible honesty. Derek leaned forward. "Victoria, with respect, we should not reduce this to one man's hero story. Cybersecurity is collaborative. Many employees contributed to the environment in which his actions were possible." Priya looked at him as if he had stepped on something sacred. Victoria did not move. "Then why was his name removed from your executive summary?" Derek's mouth tightened. "The summary was intended for clarity." "Clarity," Howard repeated, and there was no warmth in the word. Priya opened the document history. A clean audit trail appeared. Nathan's name had been present in an earlier draft. His containment tree had been attributed to night operations. 12 minutes later, Derek's account changed the author line to Security Response Leadership. 6 minutes after that, Nathan's escalation message was reclassified as low priority. The boardroom went so silent that the building ventilation sounded like wine through an empty station. Derek looked at the screen, then at Victoria. "I was trying to protect the company from confusion during a critical contract review." Victoria's voice stayed low. "You were protecting yourself." He blinked. "That is not fair." Neither was letting him walk out while his daughter watched. The sentence landed harder than a reprimand because it was not corporate. It was human. It reached past policy and touched the thing everyone in that room had spent years learning to avoid: conscience. Howard removed his glasses. "Mr. Shaw, pending full review, you are relieved of system authority effective immediately." Derek stood too fast. "You cannot be serious." "I am. You are making a mistake." Victoria looked at him then, not with rage, but with the clean finality of a door closing. "I made my mistake this morning. I do not intend to repeat it." Security did not rush in. No one shouted. Derek was escorted out with professional calm, and somehow that made it worse. Pride prefers a scene. It can fight a scene. It does not know what to do when the room simply withdraws respect. After the door closed, Howard turned back to Victoria. "Where is Mr. Cole now?" "At St. Mercy with his daughter." "Will he come here?" Victoria looked toward the window, where sunlight spread across the city Nathan had crossed that morning with no badge, no apology, and no promise that anyone would ever know the truth. "Only if we ask correctly." By late afternoon, Nathan returned to Langley Systems. Not through the service entrance, not through the side hallway where night staff usually slipped in unnoticed, but through the main lobby with Emily beside him. Her appointment had gone well enough to let her leave with a grape popsicle stain on her sleeve and a sticker that said "I was brave today." Nathan had tried to leave her with Mrs. Alvarez at the hospital desk, but Emily refused. "If they say sorry, I want to hear it," she said. And Nathan, who had taught her that truth mattered, could not argue with that. The lobby that morning had glanced away from him. Now it watched him arrive. Receptionists stopped typing. Engineers paused near the turnstiles. A facilities worker who knew Nathan from overnight repairs nodded with quiet respect. Victoria waited near the elevators, not above him, not behind a glass wall, but on the same floor. She had removed her blazer. Her hair, usually perfect, had loosened near her cheek. For the first time since Nathan had known her, she looked less like a title and more like a person carrying the weight of what she had done. "Nathan," she said. He stopped a few feet away. Emily stood close to his side, holding the rabbit USB in both hands. Victoria looked at the child first. "Emily, your father helped protect a lot of people today, including this company, including the hospital." Emily's chin lifted slightly. "I know." A faint, painful smile touched Victoria's face. "I believe you knew before we did." Then she turned to Nathan. Around them, the lobby had gone still. Not staged, not ordered, simply still. "I was wrong," Victoria said. "I judged one moment without honoring the hours behind it. I accepted another man's version because it was convenient. I let your silence make you easy to dismiss, when it should have made me listen more carefully." Nathan did not rescue her from the discomfort. He let the apology stand on its own. That was another kind of grace. Not cheap forgiveness. Not performance. Just room for truth to breathe. "You humiliated me in front of my daughter," he said quietly. Victoria's eyes filled, though her voice remained steady. "I did. And you ignored the warning because of my badge level." "I did. That cannot happen again. Not to me. Not to the next person working nights. Not to the janitor who notices smoke before the executive sees fire." Victoria nodded. "Then help me build a company where it does not." Nathan looked around the lobby, at the faces watching him now with the respect they should have offered before the proof arrived. He was still tired, still hurt, still a father with bills, a daughter, and a muffin he had not yet eaten. But dignity had a way of standing even when the body was worn down. Emily slipped her small hand into his. Nathan squeezed it gently, then looked back at Victoria. "I will listen to the offer," he said. And in the lobby of Langley Systems, where a good man had walked out in shame before breakfast, the first quiet step toward redemption began before sunset. By sunset, Langley Systems no longer felt like the same building. The glass walls were still there, the silver logo still gleamed above the lobby, and the elevators still rose with the soft confidence of money and design. But something unseen had shifted in the air. People spoke more quietly. They looked at the night shift desks differently. They noticed the cleaning cart near the west hallway, the tired analyst eating soup from a paper cup, the receptionist who remembered every visitor's name. Sometimes redemption begins not with a speech, but with a room learning how many people it had failed to see. Nathan Cole sat in the main conference room with Emily beside him, a bottle of water in front of him. The blueberry muffin finally opened on a small napkin. He had eaten 2 bites because Emily kept watching him until he did. Across the table, Victoria Langley placed a folder in front of him, but she did not slide it forward like a transaction. She set it down carefully, almost respectfully, as if papers could also carry apology. Howard Klein sat to her right. Priya Nair sat near Nathan, laptop open, the archived logs preserved and verified. No one mentioned Derek Shaw except in procedural terms. His access had been revoked, his actions submitted for independent review, and his name removed from the chain of command he had tried to claim. That was enough. Nathan had not asked to watch anyone fall. He only asked that no one else be stepped over in the dark. Victoria folded her hands on the table. "The board has approved the creation of a new division," she said. "Human Cyber Defense. Its first mission will be protecting hospitals, schools, rural clinics, and nonprofit care networks that cannot afford to be treated as low priority." Nathan listened without moving. Emily's eyes widened slightly at the word hospitals. Victoria continued, "We would like you to lead it. Full authority over escalation protocols. Direct access to executive review. No employee warning can be buried because of rank. No night shift report can be dismissed without verification. And every critical alert must carry the name of the person who saw it first." Priya looked down with a small smile. Howard added, "Compensation will reflect the position. Health coverage, flexible scheduling, and support for family care are included." Nathan's eyes lowered to the folder. Once, offers like this would have touched the ambitious part of him, the part that liked hard problems and clean solutions and rooms where his mind had space to run. But that man had changed. He was still there, but fatherhood had taught him a different measure of success. A title meant nothing if Emily had to wonder whether work would take him away again. Money mattered, yes, when rent was due and prescriptions cost more than they should. Respect mattered too, but peace mattered most. He looked at Victoria. I have conditions. She nodded. Name them. My daughter comes first. Agreed. Night staff get the same protection as executives. If they raise an alarm, someone qualified responds. Agreed. No one uses family hardship as a reason to question competence. Victoria swallowed. Agreed. Nathan glanced toward Priya. And Priya helps build the division. Priya looked up, startled. Me? Nathan's tired smile appeared for the first time that day. You spoke when it cost something. That is the kind of person a system needs. Priya blinked quickly and nodded. Victoria looked at her. Agreed. Emily leaned toward her father and whispered, not quietly enough, ask for better snacks at work. The room paused. Then, for the first time all day, gentle laughter moved around the table. Not cruel, not nervous, just human. Nathan looked at Victoria with mock seriousness. And better snacks. Victoria smiled, small but real. Also agreed. The next morning, Langley Systems held an all-hands meeting in the central atrium. Every floor looked down through the glass railings. Engineers, analysts, managers, custodians, receptionists, interns, board members, and security guards gathered shoulder to shoulder beneath the wide ceiling where sunlight poured across polished stone. Nathan stood near the front with Emily on one side and Priya on the other. He wore the same navy jacket. His face was still pale with exhaustion. He had not transformed into someone flashy or untouchable overnight. That was the point. The man they had ignored was the same man standing before them now. Only their eyes had changed. Victoria stepped to the microphone. She did not begin with company values. She did not begin with revenue. She began with the truth. Yesterday morning, I fired a man I should have thanked. The atrium went silent. I saw exhaustion and called it failure. I saw a low title and assumed a low impact. I accepted a convenient story instead of reading the evidence. Nathan Cole protected this company, protected St. Mercy Children's Hospital Network, and protected families who will never know his name. And he did it while many of us were asleep, including me. No one moved. Nathan looked down, uncomfortable. Under attention, and Emily squeezed his hand. Victoria turned toward him. Nathan, I am sorry. Publicly, clearly, and without excuse. The apology did not erase the morning before. It did not turn humiliation into something harmless. But it honored the truth, and sometimes that is where healing first finds a place to stand. Nathan stepped to the microphone after a moment. He looked out at the faces, some ashamed, some grateful, some simply quiet. I am not here because I wanted recognition, he said. I am here because systems are built by people, and people get missed when we care more about badges than warnings. He paused, letting the words settle. The person who sees the first sign of trouble may not be the person with the biggest office. It may be the night analyst. It may be the intern. It may be the person fixing a cable under a desk. Listen anyway. A few heads lowered. A few eyes filled. Nathan looked at Emily, then back to the room. And when someone falls asleep after standing too long, check what they were standing against before you decide who they are. For a long second, there was no applause. The atrium held a silence, so complete it felt almost sacred. Then Mrs. Alvarez from St. Mercy appeared on the screen behind them through a live hospital call, surrounded by nurses from 3 departments. She simply said, "From our children and our families, thank you." That was when the room rose. Not all at once, but slowly, like respect returning to a place where it should have lived already. People stood from every level, one floor after another, until Nathan Cole was surrounded not by noise, but by recognition. Emily looked up at him, proud and teary-eyed. "Daddy," she whispered, "they see you now." Nathan bent and kissed the top of her head. "They see what matters," he said. Months later, a small sign hung outside a new office on the 42nd floor, not far from the security center where everything had begun. It read Human Cyber Defense, but beneath it Emily had taped a handwritten note in purple marker. "My daddy protects doors people forget to lock." No one took it down. Victoria passed it every morning and touched the corner lightly before entering her office, a quiet reminder that control without grace becomes blindness. Priya built protocols that made every alert traceable, every warning accountable, every quiet voice harder to erase. And Nathan still works strange hours sometimes, because important doors do not only need guarding from 9 to 5. But now, when he stayed late, someone brought him coffee. Someone checked whether he had eaten. Someone asked about Emily before asking about the dashboard. That was not charity. That was respect. And in the same room where people once mistook his silence for weakness, Nathan Cole taught them a better truth. Dignity does not need to shout to be strong. Goodness does not disappear because pride overlooks it. And sometimes the person with his head down is not sleeping through the crisis at all. Sometimes he is the reason everyone else gets to wake up safely.